This is a story about how a piece of red oak that looks like this turned into this.
Before showing how I designed and produced my house sign, I thought some background information would be in order. This is my carving kit. I bought it decades ago, but never used it. It just sat in my basement unused. More about the toolkit later. I decided a few summers back that it was time to play with it, so I took it along with me when I went camping. I love wreck sites in British Columbia. They're always great places to find the outdoor experience. You can hike, you can fish, you can bike. Basically, there's a lot of leisure time, and it was then that I started using my carving kit. I'd sit around and play with wood that I had found in the campsite, and in the late afternoons or around the campfires and evenings, I'd pull it out and just play with it. I'm not a good carver, that's for sure. I've been more of an engraver. That's all that I've been able to really master so far. Here's an early example of some work with pieces of wood that I gave to a group of friends who you will meet later. It's in honor of one of the group who we lost to cancer a couple of years back.
This is Cindy the cat. We'll see her later on in this video. She sat and watched me a lot. Hello, fat cat. P.S. The reason she's a fat cat is because of you know who. Hard to resist those eyes.
In this video, I wanted to document and share with others how I went about designing and producing a hand-carved oak sign for my front yard. Every project needs a starting point. It needs an idea to get you going. The sign in my yard was one that I inherited from my dad. He gave it to me when they sold their house back in the 1990s, and since then he has passed on. The sign is in need of attention again. I have to varnish it every few years. Looking at it, I thought it might be fun for me to do something on my own, and so I did. In the last few years, I've been experimenting with more carving and fiddling. Anything that I've done, I've always given away to friends. I thought it was time to do something for myself. I've taken my dad's sign away, and it will be kept forever as it has a special place in my heart. But it's time to replace it with a new one.
That's a piece of oak. It's been in my basement gathering dust for years. It was used in a project by a friend many years ago, and he had some bits that were left over. And so I found this one day rooting around downstairs in this beautiful oak. I think it's called red oak. One side nicely finished. The edges are a little bit rough. And this is the piece of material that I started with.
With the wood selected, the next key step is the design of the lettering that went onto my sign. I wanted something that worked with my name. I also know that I'm not very good with printing nor drawing, and I can't just freehand cut. I would use my word processor. I would create a template there. But in my word processor, there weren't fonts that really seemed to suit my name. So I went to Google, searched for free fonts. It gave me a list. I chose the first one in the list, which is called 1001 Fonts, and while in there saw that there was a section on Old English fonts and knew that that would probably be where I would find something that would work with me. I went to Scotland in 2010. Here's the group of friends that I talked about earlier. While there, we traveled around, saw old things that I'm not used to here in North America, and it really connected me with my past. My past comes from the clans of Scotland, and inside 1000 Fonts, I found this sample that seemed to work. It's called Celtic. I downloaded it, put it into my computer, turned the paper to landscape mode, and then made the printing big enough by fiddling around such that when it was printed and the sheets all taped together, that it would be big enough on my sign. With that, I had my template done and it was time to start cutting. First, the board was stained. It took 2 coats of dark walnut to get it this nice dark color. Then I taped my template to the board and used a scalpel to cut away the letters that I would later carve on. The scalpel makes for a really sharp edge that makes the carving much easier.
This is the workspace. Not much here. Good lighting is a must, I guess. So just a nice flat table service. Oh, pardon a glass of wine. I only used it once in the production of this sign, and it's right here in this video, so excuse me for that. Nice flat table surface with good lighting. Cindy sits there in her cage. Cindy's my cat and often watches me when I work. And here's my tools. Bought this box years and years ago. Don't remember when. It's actually been decades. It's called X-Acto, and in it are 3 handles. This is the one that I use all the time because it's fatter and allows me to have a better grip. And then a whole slew of different kinds of cutting edges, some circular ones, triangular ones, a bunch of knife-edged ones, and they fit into these different handles. This is the handle that I like best. The set has other stuff in it. There's a little planer and a sander I've never used. But this is what I like the best for the actual carving is a fatter handle. And the edge that I used for everything in this video was this little U-shaped guy. Maybe it's not in focus, I guess, but whatever, you get what I'm saying. U-shaped tool. I tried some other ones. I tried a V, but it just digs too deep too fast and I wasn't very good at it. And off to the side, I always have a stone or a little fine grit sanding paper. I bought this in a fishing store, pardon the moth. One side is a little bit coarser, one side finer, a little bit of mineral oil, and I keep my stone in use, sharpening my tool like this frequently. The sharper it is, the better it is. Doesn't need much.
Now that I had the letter pattern scored on the oak, the next step is the fun one, the actual carving of the board itself. Using my fattest handle and U-shaped edge, I cut each letter in its turn. I learned how to feel the grain and knew when it was time to be firm or gentle. One accidental slip and you make a deep scratch, which is almost impossible to repair. Basically, you have to start over by sanding and staining the board again. It took me a few days to finish the side. I took my time, never working more than an hour or so in any one session. I'd do 1 or 2 letters of a time, depending on how big they were. If I went any longer, I found I got tired and made more mistakes. Each letter took several passes. Scoring the edges first with the scalpel made the carving much easier and reduced splintered edges. Once done, I decided a border would be a nice finish to the sign. I drew a line about 1 centimeter from the edge with a felt that I would use to cut on, and for the edges I laid a quarter down to get a nice curve. My plan is to hang the sign from an outside vertical post with a short horizontal arm for the sign. Knowing the rear side would be visible, I thought, why not do something on the rear side? After all, carving the front was fun. Again, I wanted something to do with my heritage. While in Scotland, I remember seeing many Scottish thistles there. This photo of one is taken on the banks of the River Spey. To do more than just letter engraving, I wanted to try something a bit more intricate, so I thought a Scottish thistle would be fun to try on the rear side. So once again I used Google, found myself a little clip art graphic of a Scottish thistle, put it into the word processor, played around with size so I would have a printout that matched the board. I wanted a bit more and decided to add the family motto, which is "Hold Fast." From there the process was similar to the front. First I scored the thistle in the center of the sign and moved outwards from there. Carving the thistle was fun and I was happy with the result. I positioned the motto to surround the thistle, then scored it with a scalpel and finished carving the rear side. Like the front, I took a few days to carve the letters in frame. With practice, I got a bit faster, but forced myself to only work in short stints. This really helped me to avoid the dreaded accidental slip, which would mess up the entire side.
Once the board was carved, I needed to finish it before I could call it done. I started with some stains. I must admit I played around a little bit, working with different kinds of stains. I used Varathane simply because they seem to have lots on the shelf and many different finishes. I think it's pretty hard to tell in the video, but this one here is a Provincial, an early American, and even on the labels it happens to say that these colors on the can are done on red oak, and that's what I have, so that was nice. So I bought stains and I played around with them, and I have to tell you that for best results, at least for a sign, you need a lot of contrast between the lettering and the surface layer. Whoops, that's Cindy, my cat. She has a weight problem. It worked out best when I used the darkest stain I could get, which was a dark walnut. So that's the stain I used to finish the board. I actually put 2 coats on so it would be nice and dark. And then to make it waterproof and meant for outdoor use, I bought this can of Varathane. You can see it's an exterior and it's a satin finish. For some reason I just didn't want glossy. And I just use these cheap throwaway foam brushes. They don't cost very much, and I wanted this size because it would fit in these small cans that I bought. The board wasn't big. If it was a bigger project, I'd have a bigger can and I would have used bigger brushes, but they're pretty cheap to buy and you can throw them away. And then this nasty looking contraption back here is my drying rack. After the board was finished, I measured it, and then I just pounded some spikes through a cheap piece of plywood, and I measured it off so that the spikes would fit exactly to the corners of the board. It just made for way less time waiting for drying because I could do 2 sides at once, and they leave a mark which is almost invisible.
With the carving complete comes the final step in the project, that being preparing the wood for outdoor use. I never recorded how long I spent getting to this point in the project, but if I was to add in the design, the computer work, the sanding, and then carving, it would be at least 20 hours of work, maybe 30. Sealing the board took more time than I expected. To get the finish I wanted, I gave the sign 10 different coats. Using a foam brush, I applied long, even strokes parallel to the wood grain. The varathane dries quickly, so you must be steady and not try to touch up more than just a few minutes after the initial stroke of the brush, as it leaves a mark in the fast-drying varathane. After 10 coats, the rough areas carved into the wood smoothed out and looked waterproof and ready for the outside elements. The drying rack with the 4 nails allowed me to coat both sides in one session. I let it dry at least 24 hours between layers, so I saved 10 days in the drying process by doing both sides at the same time. I did not sand between coats except for the last 3 layers. When I did sand, I used a very fine 400 grit sandpaper and used it with just a few light strokes to smooth the surface. The last coat felt like satin. With the last coat dried, it's time to hang the sign outside. I have yet to do that because I need a sign hanger and that is not yet complete. My plan is to mount a metal pole in concrete with a horizontal arm about shoulder height from which the sign will hang. I don't have it made yet, as I'm looking for something funky from a junkyard that will work. When I see it, I'll know it. This was a fun project for me, and Cindy got her first starring role. The intent of this video was to share my experience, hoping it might help another mix computers and hand engraving on red oak. Cindy is patiently sitting by the phone awaiting her first call from Hollywood as well. Thanks for watching.